Of Retailing Weekly, one of my favorite times of the week where I get to talk about interesting things that are happening in the world of retail and what on earth my thoughts are on them. This week we've got some really interesting conversation. I'm sure a lot of you guys have your eyes and ears on the ground in terms of what's been happening at Amazon. And so I want to kind of start off this conversation by talking about the recent distribution strategy that you guys might have heard of in regards to Nike. So basically, what was happening was Nike decided to go onto Amazon and start to sell through Amazon as kind of a direct to consumer strategy. As you guys all know, Amazon actually used to and still does sell a lot of Nike products, but they sell products through kind of these other distributors, these third party distributors. But what's so interesting is they joined Amazon really in an attempt to be able to make more money, increase their gross margin, and be able to do a lot better by selling directly through Amazon. Now, what's really interesting is that since Nike has joined Amazon, their sales have actually decreased on their site by 15%. This article was originally published on Glossy Magazine, glossy.co, an amazing publication, guys. Please continue to read that and support that publication. But what's interesting, guys, is we've always cautioned on brands using Amazon as a distribution strategy. And the reason primarily being is you can't really control what Amazon's doing, right? We know that Amazon does do a lot of private label. We know they make a huge amount of their revenues doing things like advertising. And so the big issue here seems to be, what is it that a brand can do, or a brand even as big as Nike, right? How can they control their business model and their business revenue if they are still being cannibalized by a site as big as Amazon? So this is going to be something big that we kind of continue to look at as we move through the evolution of what Amazon is doing. What I think is really fascinating here is that Amazon essentially allows you, if you pay enough of the premium on advertising, you can be selling almost anything, right? You don't necessarily need to be an authorized seller. You could be a reseller, unauthorized, especially if you were a part of Amazon before they started to have much more stricter rules and regulations on who could sell on there. Obviously, you have to be credible, have some selling history. But imagine if you're, buying a lot of old Nikes and let's say spending enough money on their advertising platform, the Nike registration as being a authorized seller might actually not come up as high, right, as some of these other third-party sellers that are reselling Nike, or that they're looking at their business more in terms of volume as opposed to just that one sale, right? So a lot of these companies right now are on the lookout, as far as the Nikes of the world, in terms of how this really portends to their business go forward. What's interesting also, guys, is I mentioned this the other week, is that Calvin Klein, their underwear campaign, they actually did a pop-up shop with Amazon. And so I think it'll be interesting to see here if a similar issue comes up in terms of selling directly Calvin Klein products, if we start to see a similar situation like that versus some of these third-party sellers. So Amazon, I think, continues to be a very, very difficult process, right? And I think the reason why is we're trying to figure out exactly what is their goal, right? What exactly are they trying to accomplish here? Okay, next really interesting article that came out on The Telegraph was luxury goods suppliers can ban distributor selling on Amazon, right? Says the European Union law. So this is interesting. It'll be interesting to see if similar legislation will emerge in the US or other different regions of the world. This ruling basically has been made in the UK and the EU that luxury suppliers have the right to prevent their products from being sold on sites like Amazon. Because this is where and how kind of the exuding of what a luxury brand means, right? So when you think about, what it means to be sold at Amazon, a lot of luxury brands kind of think about that diluting, right? Diluting their actual brand and diluting what they're trying to accomplish. So what I think is fascinating here is a lot of companies like Gucci, for example, and some of the bigger ones, they kind of have these police, right? These internet police that go out there and monitor. They want to see what's being distributed, what's not being distributed. They need to go in there. They want to take down some of these places that are reselling products or selling discounted or fake products that they shouldn't have access to. And in fact, there are entire legal teams that are dedicated to really being able to do that. And I think it's really fascinating, right? But I do think it's important that we start to see that Amazon, again, is starting to have a much more tighter tighter grip. They're not going to be able to get away with as much as they used to. I don't know if this kind of legislation would pass in the US. Certainly, the EU tends to have a bit more strictness because a lot of the luxury heritage brands are coming out of the EU. So obviously we think about made in Italy, made in France, as being, or made in Spain, as being some of those really big drivers when it comes to luxury and exclusivity. Now, we've always here at Scaling Retail have been really conscientious and cautious about, again, advising brands to go ahead and sell on Amazon. I certainly think that there are some brands that do very well with an Amazon distribution. The best ones, I feel, have diversified products and different kinds of revenue streams that they're actually pushing out there. So what does that mean? That means that they're not using their same brand name as they go onto Amazon and start to sell to some different distributors. Sell on different platform. The ones that usually use the same brand name, that kind of use the same language, maybe it's a copy and paste. It's very difficult because as a business owner, you have to ask yourself, am I willing to pay in order to get the sales that I need on Amazon, right? Certainly it's not just having your products up there and being search engine optimized. It's also about investing in the advertising, investing in having enough people come to your products in order to drive up the ranking of how people find those products, right? So that I think is really fascinating because again, it's not just about having your products on Amazon. There are millions of products on Amazon. It's about being able to have those products be searched and found. And I think that without having a strategy behind that, just selling on Amazon is not going to really help, right? It's not going to necessarily give you the revenue stream that you're looking for. You might actually be better off taking those investment dollars, driving traffic through experiential, through some direct marketing back to your website, right? I think that's probably a better way to go. Now, as far as protection of these resellers that are selling, let's say, on Amazon in the EU of these luxury brands, well, you have to ask yourself, is it fair to be able to limit someone's distribution? Is it fair to be able to say you cannot sell these products on another marketplace when you actually own the merchandise, right? It's not like we're saying that, this is some kind of illegal transaction. This is actually very legal. So the question now becomes, what kinds of restrictions are now going to be put on these traditional retailers that are selling multiple brands and that use Amazon as a huge point of distribution, right? This is going to be a problem. How are they going to take their businesses and now translate them onto e-commerce sites and expect to see the same kind of SEO, revenue generation, and customer lifetime cycles, right? It's going to be totally different. It's almost as if they'll be starting from scratch. So this is important, guys. We always talk to our clients about not being beholden to a certain marketplace. I oftentimes am concerned when I hear brands that are getting their starts on Etsy and then they're like, well, I have this big business here. How am I going to grow it and develop it over time? And the real issue is that on company sites like Etsy, amazing places, right? Amazing if you're a fashion hobbyist, amazing if you're trying to really just get going. But when it comes to owning your business, right, you've got to ask yourself, is it more valuable for me to own my own business on my own platform, invest some money into driving traffic onto my own platform, or do I want to keep and continuing investing on a second party site, marketplace site like an Amazon or an Etsy? All right, guys, so more interesting articles that are coming up. This is really interesting. So there are a lot of scam sites that are coming up that are ripping off a lot of your favorite products. This was an article that came out on Racked. Businesses are having their products and brand images ripped off by scam companies on Facebook and Shopify aren't doing much to help. And one of the examples that they give are some of these startups that actually started their businesses. One's called SheFit that they end up referencing, and they really built an amazing audience. Now, unfortunately, what ended up happening is all of a sudden, all of these different knockoffs and scam sites started coming up, and guess what? They started targeting their customers, right? So you've got to start to ask yourself, especially as a small to medium-sized business that's getting started that doesn't have a really big brand name, how can you ensure shoppers that you're dealing with an authorized seller of the goods, right? What should companies and Shopify, how can they really fix this? And so I think in terms of being an authorized seller and letting people know that you're original, right? There are certain things you can do to make sure that says authentic, right? The first thing you can do is obviously have a registered trademark symbol, make sure that you're using that. You can also start to use language like original, and what's so funny, guys, is I was recently on the airplane going to Orlando last week for a business meeting. And on the plane, I saw this movie that was all about the first McDonald's. And what was really fascinating, and I think I'd heard the story before, but not fully realized it, was the original McDonald's, was in San Bernardino, and it was started by these two brothers. Then there was a gentleman that came along and said, hey, we need to franchise this. We need this to become something bigger. We need this to become something, more national, right? The Golden Arches need to represent something special. This guy went ahead and signed a contract with the brothers and started national franchise operations of McDonald's. And in fact, guys, he then started to own the rights and started calling his company the McDonald's Corporation, even though, right, McDonald's was already a restaurant that already had all of its legal standing. Now, at the end of the day, this guy who does all the franchising ends up branding, buying out the brothers, and calling his business McDonald's Number One, right? Even though obviously, guys, McDonald's Number One was certainly these other people, not him. And this guy really just saw an amazing business opportunity to be able to franchise this and grow this and build it into something bigger. So anyway, movie watching on the airplane. But what I think is fascinating here is being able to brand yourself as number one or brand yourself as original, as we all know, certainly doesn't mean a whole lot, right? So when we think about how do you actually get around this issue and this problem, I think the first thing to really think about is how are you going to really position your market and get yourself in front of your ideal customer base? And is that going to happen in a way that's through building a lot of visual assets that really show your visual perspective that is obviously more and more difficult to replicate, right? If you have a certain way that you shoot things, a certain way that you talk about things, those things are really important to build your brand identity. No matter if you're making $100,000 a year or your business is making $10 million a year, right? Or $50 million a year. If you guys are not properly branded across all your channels, no matter how much money you're making, someone can still come along, rip off what you're doing, and create something bigger and something better and take away those customers. So I think branding is extremely important. And then I think sites like Facebook and Shopify, which obviously aren't doing much to kind of stop this from happening, I think what's important here is companies like Shopify need to step in and need to make sure that we are authorized sellers, right? That what you're doing is legal, that you are actually a real business, that you're not selling things that are counterfeit, you're not selling things that are illegal. I think there does need to be a little bit more regulation on that. But then it kind of begs the question, a company like Zappos, which originally started off photographing pictures of shoes, posting them online, and then selling them, right, through those photographs, a company like that could not have existed in a space like we're talking about today, right, where everything is so regulated. And so to further expand on that, I think we definitely need to think about what is the fine line here between being a scrappy entrepreneur and a startup and then doing something that's kind of explicitly illegal or doing something that should not take place. Now, certainly everyone will find their own workarounds to that, but I think that's an important thing to consider. Now, lastly, guys, in order to protect your business and protect your branding, it's important that you stay vigilant, even as a small to medium-sized business. As soon as you notice that someone is copying or knocking you off, the first thing you want to do is send an email and have legal counsel start to step in, right? Legal counsel is important because it'll allow you to have something more official, hey, cease and desist, etc. So much fun, right? So much stuff going on in the news. All right. So next big thing that's coming up, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Calypso St. Bart, but oh my God, such a huge brand, a personal favorite, a company that I just loved going to their stores, their aesthetic, their vision, right, was so on point. They had a very specific brand. Now, Calypso St. Bart is going to be liquidating and closing out the rest of its 16 remaining stores, right? And a lot of interested buyers have popped up. They want to purchase their intellectual property, a retailer, a private shoe label, companies wanting to use its name. We have to ask ourselves, guys, what could be a strategic opportunity for an interested buyer, right? What is it that we would actually want to do in terms of taking over the name and the brand? And so what I would do, right, if I was an interested buyer is I would say, okay, Calypso St. Bart is known for exuding a certain kind of lifestyle. I think they might have over-diversified in terms of what their assortment was, but they were one of the very first brands to really exude lifestyle. What they didn't do very well was digital marketing and advertising. What they really lacked was an ability to communicate that brand vision and stay consistent, right? I really feel like they kind of missed the marker and fell off the boat, let's say in the last 5 to 10 years. They were kind of one of the first, and then they really did not innovate digitally. And so this, I think, is an amazing example when we start to think about who are going to be the retail successes and who are going to be the retailers that end up kind of falling flat. Unfortunately, I think Calypso is one of those brands that is not going to be that kind of fell flat. And so I think a really great buyer would be someone who would come in and really invest the dollars into reviving what Calypso St. Bart means today. It is the original. It is the forefront of what so many lifestyle brands have built a business on, and that is resort wear, right? It's like how many businesses said, wow, Calypso really created an amazing business on resort wear, right? They almost basically created a whole category of merchandise, right? It's so amazing. And yet they're no longer going to be with us. So we've got to ask ourselves, as we're developing and creating these businesses, you can take an extremely thriving and profitable business and then fail to monitor it, fail to make the positions and the pivoting, and then end up with a business that is not really thriving in the ways that it should, right? In a business that's, in essence, liquidating and closing the rest of its 16 stores. All right, guys, a couple more interesting articles. One that I think is really, really important here is talking about Moda Operandi. Moda is one of my favorite channels because I believe that Moda has done so much to really help small to medium-sized businesses. They were really on the forefront of bringing back pre-selling and trunk shows and really making it into something, kind of almost how Gilt Group was, really kind of the sample sale online place, right? Sample sale meets outlet, the first kind of digital platform for that. Well, Moda was really the first platform to really bring back the trunk show. Now, what I think is so fascinating is Moda is actually now going to be bringing in Prada, right? They're going to be unveiling a Prada assortment, and they're expanding on their high-end luxury space. Now, this is something that's important to keep your eyes on top of, mostly because Prada, right, which is usually pretty narrow, and a lot of the higher-end luxury brands don't really want to do this kind of digital trunk shows. But what I think is really fascinating is that this is a partnership with Moda, right? This is in partnership with the design team from Moda, right? This is not just let's bring on your product. This is a little bit more of a collaboration. And so what I think is great here is this is the way that Prada is saying, hey, let's become fresh. Let's become relevant. Let's not be afraid of being able to kind of sit within a wider mix of other types of brands. Now, hey guys, I gotta tell you, I remember back in the day when I was at Barney's, and it's back in 2007. I remember being in an office with our director of e-commerce and having in the room, the guys from president of Balenciaga and, talking about why it's important to be online and online merchandising. And, we've come a really long way from there, right? It's been about 10 years. But what I think is so fascinating is not only have we seen these brands kind of embrace going digital, but now it's like, how do we embrace these new ways of getting in front of our consumer? How do we start to get a piece of that pie? And so I think this collaboration with Moda is going to be very successful. I think working in tandem, so not just saying as a big design house, this is what I think is so important, this is what I think it needs to look like, but actually saying, here are some opportunities for us to collaborate based on who your customer is, to collaborate based on what is doing well. I think that is extremely valuable and really important. Now, lastly, guys, and this one kind of speaks true to my heart, which is another article from Women's Wear Daily, which is about Yoox and Ice. And Ice is from Italy. It's basically the Italian government. And they are going into a collaboration to start to really work with Yoox on pushing out small to medium-sized businesses. And why is this important? Well, as we've profiled in our Age of the Emerging Designer report, there's no better time to be a small to medium-sized business. In fact, this is the moment, right? This is your time. And now we're starting to see more and more collaborations between governments, between cities that are doing a lot to promote small business, that are doing a lot to promote medium-sized companies. And really because that is where so much growth and so much potential really comes out of the market. So I think it's, really fascinating because in this collaboration with Yoox, they're actually going to be promoting their products to the US market, to the Chinese market, and they're not just saying, hey, let's let's just promote these brands. They're saying, let's do a partnership. So traditionally in the past, guys, a lot of these partnerships are more like city grants, right? They're more like workshops or incubators. Not saying, hey, let's put 3 million euros into a collaboration, into marketing, into getting these brands ready. So I think that that is an important thing to realize is it takes money in order to make a significant investment. Now, this project with ICE started in brick and mortar. Now they're expanding digitally. And I think that this is a great example. And I think that a lot of local, city, and national government should really take note at not just investing in small business, but investing in retail. Historically, when we see downturns in the economy, when we see things are changing, consumer spending is changing, companies in retail, specifically in fashion, in beauty, in these categories, still do well. And why is that? It's because people still want to wear things. It is emotionally connected to them, right? This is something that is, it's psychological, right? When you wear clothes, when you're dressing up, when you're wearing beauty categories, by the way, skyrocket in times of economic depression because it's such a small investment in order to be able to walk away with a luxury product. But this is a great way of investing back into your economy. So anyway, guys, as you can see, the light is dimming, which is another excuse for me to take off. But we are all done with today's Retailing Weekly. Another big and exciting piece of news, guys. If you're not already subscribed to our newsletter or you don't already follow us on Instagram or any of our other social channels, is I was recently nominated by Women's Wear Daily as one of the top 20 women in business for 2017. Big thumbs up, really excited about that. So please check out Women's Wear Daily for today's newspaper, which is December 18th. And take a look. I'm very excited to be featured in that. So guys, thank you for watching. This will be up once we get some editing done, and I will talk to you all soon. Thanks. Bye.